So growing up, I was obsessed with Peter Pan. I used to climb up on top of the mantle and then jump off over and over and over again. And I felt like I was practicing flying. I felt like every single time I jumped into the air, I actually made a little bit of progress. I've kind of always identified with the trickster in general, especially in media. It kind of felt like when I was watching a movie, a trickster was something that I could be. It was something that people would understand me as. I think a lot of us have had the experience of watching Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. You don't really want to be Charlie, necessarily. You want to be Wonka. And Charlie wants to be Wonka. The film's central premise is essentially that we all can become Wonka if we can understand him. The film also takes Charlie on a journey of tests so that he can actually become a better steward of the kind of power that Wonka holds than Wonka is himself. Wonka himself, who turns out to be someone who has no real great compunctions about, chucking children down various chutes or giving them chronic illnesses. Joker might seem a little bit dissimilar to that at first, but I feel like they're all tricksters at their core. It's just more of like a trickster good, trickster neutral, trickster chaotic, whatever those are, kind of situation. They're all just different little variants. And they're all also like powerful male archetypes. These are characters who are men or boys, and the line here is a little bit blurred because a trickster is what you might consider in a certain kind of a Jungian sense an immature man or a type of an immature masculine. And there are some Jungian books like this one, which is really good, King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, that essentially present the trickster as a variant of the immature masculine. There's a side note that I don't think that this is like, oh yeah, this is something innate about human nature. I feel like most Jungian analysis is essentially just like Substack posts before that was a thing. Jesus Christ. Jeez, why is this so hard? It's because I'm still trying to hold this. Okay. The know-it-all trickster is, as the name implies, the immature masculine energy that plays tricks of a more or less serious nature in one's own life and on others. He's always looking for a sucker. He is a practical joker, adept at making fools of us. He is a manipulator, which to my teenage self was like, well, great, that sounds very powerful. And it is. And when I use the term power here, I use it very literally. Like, these are people who have power over their environment, whether that's like a physical environment, Wonka's factory, or a social environment, in that they seem to be somehow above any related hierarchy or power structure, or at least alongside it. Which is why it's kind of obviously very alluring to a young man like I was. And not that there's anything wrong with that. Power is cool. And so the Jungian book it places the trickster as a kind of an immature magician. It's someone who has power, but uses it for just kind of stupid reasons, or reasons that mostly only pertain to them. And so the boyishness of play, the Peter Pan-ness of it all, is something that has also this shade of cruelty, like a cat playing with a dead mouse. It's a kind of a cruelty, and it's a kind of a cruelty that can stem from like this boredom or ennui or disconnection. I'm using somewhat specific definitions of these words because otherwise you could very reasonably be like, well, I don't know, what's the difference between a trickster and a clown and a joker and a whatever. In my concept, the trickster is distinct from the clown because the clown might abase himself to entertain others. The jester might play with power to entertain society at large, or to kind of make everyone feel okay that the power structure isn't beyond the reach of someone. But the trickster plays with the world around them purely to amuse themselves, and it kind of has this inherent detachment and callousness from the results of their play. And so my thoughts about, why do we like these stories and why are they so persuasive to us, is that these stories about tricksters, where what we see through them are protagonists who attempt to understand these other characters and whose understanding of them ends up being extremely important, is that is a kind of like a primal survival empathy, because essentially these stories about tricksters tell us that, yes, as we all know, power can be kind of like rational and enshrined like a king or some sort of tribal leader, but also power can look like a mad king. Power can look like someone who just happens to have power and doesn't actually seem to act on any sort of rational impulse. Usually the stories feature tricksters in a way in which, if the main character ends up somehow able to parse anything logical about their behavior, that parsing actually gives them power over the trickster's behavior. These stories are essentially like reckoning with empathy and its power as a survival tool. But wait, you might say, I mean, Pippi is the protagonist, right? Peter Pan is the protagonist, right? They've got their name on the story. It's called Peter Pan. It's called a Pippi Longstocking. But no, they may sometimes drive action, but they're not the audience perspective character. And personally, I'm just more inclined to call the audience perspective character the protagonist, whether or not they're driving action of the story. And in terms of the audience insert character, in Peter Pan, obviously it's Wendy. In Pippi Longstocking, it's Tommy and Annika, whose names I just had to look down there to even remember. They seem like such side characters, but they are the characters that we see the world through. And as we're going to see in this discussion, it's extremely problematic. Oh, but it's a bad word. Fraught. It's extremely fraught to try to make these tricksters into main characters, because all sorts of weird things start to happen to them because of the constraints of how stories work, essentially. And I find that really interesting. So here we go. Just to kind of couch that in what I was saying earlier about the way in which we attempt to understand these characters, helping us have power over them, you could argue that kind of Tommy and Annika, they gain all of the coolness of being Pippi sanctioned by kind of being taken under Pippi's wing and being in her sphere and able to kind of request things of her or have their wants and needs matter to her, gives them some access to their power, in the same way that Wendy often has to kind of like lead Peter around by the nose in terms of like a persuasive argument in order to get him to act on things that would just seem to be generally prudent Peter. And in the same sense, Charlie, by surviving Wonka's feigned temper, can kind of demonstrate his worthiness of Wonka's trust and thereby ingratiate himself into the favor of the Mad King. And Batman, in seeking to understand the Joker, allows him to maybe do something that's one step ahead of the Joker, or call the Joker's bluff on some elaborate Jokery plot. So empathy, namely like trying to understand the mind of another human, is what is allowing these characters to gain access to power, where they see it kind of enshrined for some strange worldly reason that we don't ever get into in these trickster bodies or trickster forms of madness. So you can also consider it kind of like a reckoning with or contention with madness and power and the ways in which those two things interlap. You can imagine that, madness without power, not particularly threatening. You can just kind of be like, okay, great, you do you. Madness with power is like, oh, maybe I need to learn to understand madness a little. And that's great. That's just like a fundamentally human story and a human experience of trying to understand power. Aren't those wonderful little movies? Isn't that just awesome that we get to have these wonderful films and stories that dissect this like reckoning with madness and reckoning with like a trickster spirit? Great. Glad that exists. End of video. Oh, but no! No, because what's the ultimate understanding of someone? What's like the ultimate way in which we can feel like we understand them? Backstory. We want the backstory. Give us their whole life story. We have like this yearning to understand these characters from the inside out, partially because that's what we see happening in these stories. The more that we see the Joker understood, the weaker he is. The more that we see Wonka understood, the more that we can foresee all of his little feints and tricks that are going to try to get us to take some of his goddamn candy when we should not. So what would make us even better equipped to understand these characters, but to understand their whole goddamn lives? And that's where we get the beautiful, beautiful dumpster fire of the spin-off movie. So I tried to give myself some like qualifications and restrictions to movies that specifically try to make these characters into the main character. Usually those are prequels. There's a couple sequels, or maybe one sequel. And that's just specifically because I want to kind of investigate movies that attempt to do the hard and maybe impossible thing, as we'll see, of trying to make these tricksters into audience inserts. Because what the fuck is a trickster? As like a human being? Nothing. There is no human being that's a trickster. Hello, 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 hello. When the lights out. Oh god, this movie fucking sucks. It sucks ass, which is a real shame, because I love big, stupid, wild movies, and it's just not good. And I mean, it's a shame because that scene out of context, it fucking slaps. It's awesome. But unfortunately, as I've learned from like 20 years of trying to write wild, crazy stories where like a ton of cool shit happens, nobody cares if you can't connect it to character. It's just a series of things that happen. It doesn't matter how cool those things are, and there is a lot in this movie that looks very cool. I feel like somehow the CG is kind of awesome, and the costumes are like explicitly awesome. It is such a like horrible shame that the story sucks. From the very beginning, it tries to give Peter this mommy complex where, oh yes, he feels abandoned and he needs to kind of reconnect with his mother and navigate all the various ways in which that has messed him up. Here's the problem. It hasn't messed him up at all. He is extremely silly, and the tricksterness here is retained. Like, he regularly has fun and is goofy and is playing tricks, and he just is not acting like a character that actually needs anything to happen. And so the film is also clearly unsure about that. There are a couple scenes about midway through that try to convince us, the viewers, that, oh yeah, he really needs to know what happened to his mom. Did she die?
Which means my mum is from here, which means the natives might know where she is.
Are you insane?
This dude is fine. This little boy is a silly little boy. He's having fun, he's being silly, and he has some friends, one of which is just a knockoff Han Solo who for some reason is going to be Hook.
Hook? Is that you?
Peter.
Hook! They've got Smee!
I don't know why he's going to be Hook, and the film does this really annoying thing that by now we're all very used to, where it's like, look, he has a necklace, and on the necklace is a pan flute because he's Peter Pan, and that's significant to you, the audience. And, oh look, this guy's name is Hook. You know Hook, he will be important in the future, won't he? Because he's the bad guy of a movie that you actually like, which is not this one. So in general, there's just a lot of that. Other than that, it has these big, giant, gorgeous set pieces, which are all really cool, but I do not care. At some point, it made me really want to watch the what I consider live action, even though it's CGI, the CGI Tintin, which was so good. And in my brain, it made me confused watching this movie and then thinking about Tintin, because Tintin feels like just like adventure and just go, but it must have stakes because it's good, right? This sucks. I wrote down that Peter wants his mom in the same way that you might stare glassy-eyed at a red tricycle in a department store window. It's very funny. I'm very funny. He has no emotional flaws, no immaturities. He's basically a tiny orphaned Dalai Lama. Wow. Really, Chris, you don't have to do him like that. I should also not fail to mention that there is a second scene with Hugh Jackman's Bluebeard when he plays a was edgy at some point in human history song, Blitzkrieg Bop Ramones.
What?
What do you think?
It's also fun, I guess. It's less fun than the Smells Like Teen Spirit. But really, like, these scenes, they kind of seem like they were the whole reason the movie was made. Someone just went into the pitch room, like, started playing this song, and we're like, and then Bluebeard comes out, and he stands up, and it's cool as hell. And, you know, you're not wrong. I mean, I feel like my whole life has been dedicated to try and figure out how to make those scenes cool as hell. Like, I've tried to learn character and story because I want to write those scenes. This person not quite gotten to that point yet, and that's okay. It's not okay. Okay, Hook. I watched this movie and it was just so perfect and incredible and wonderful that I took no notes. I just mostly cried. And here we have it. We have a main character Pan, and it is done beautifully, and I think it's really telling that it's a sequel. Because essentially, after you take a character who's a side character trickster, they're not going to have much characterization to begin with, and so you can easily strip them of what little growth they've had, you know, call it 10 years later, there you go. Yeah, he's sad now. But there is like a wonderful part of the he's sad now here that it isn't like he's that sad. Like Robin Williams' Peter Pan, he's going to go through this arc where it's like, okay, absentee father businessman learns how to actually connect with his kids and love baseball and actually go to a game, Dad, come on. But he's not that absent, and he's not that business. He is still silly, which is great. It's so subtle, and it's not the kind of thing that you'd get if you were just like hitting that character with a hammer and boom, you're sad, you're absent, you suck, because then we wouldn't see the Peter in him. But this character immediately seems like, yeah, okay, he's a goofy guy. I could conceivably believe that this person used to be Peter Pan at some point, and he's going to have to kind of like relearn how to get into that trickster mode. And the film also does some like whitewashing of, I'm gonna call it whitewashing. That may not be whatever. And the film also does some whitewashing of like to what extent Peter ever was a trickster. We know, having read The Barry and seen the Disney film, that like, yeah, this dude could be callous at times. This dude could kind of like forget about people, hurt people. He has the immature aspects of the trickster, the silliness that is like a detached or, you know, it's not an empathetic silliness. It's a silliness that can hurt if you get on the wrong side of someone's play. It's the kind of silliness where like he can throw sand at you in the sandbox and you're gonna be like, hey, could you stop that? And he'll just think it's funny. Kind of like the jerk silliness. This movie kind of rightly so tries to paste over that a little bit. This is now in the shot. And it tries to paste over that in a couple ways. The first way is that we see that Peter has settled down, and we eventually get a flashback in which Peter encounters a Wendy who is terrified of Peter attaching himself to her granddaughter.
I shall give her a kiss. No, Peter.
Because this is a toxic dude. This is a toxic ex, and she knows what's in store. And so she's basically like, Peter, please, I really need you to not do that. And that's the moment where we know, because of the start of the movie, that Peter actually ends up marrying Moira, and it's all fine, you know. He can change, he was changed, she changed him, he changed for her, who knows, who cares. But also there's a moment in this film where Peter kind of gets too trickstery, to the extent that he starts forgetting why he's even in Neverland, and Tink has to remind him.
Do you remember your next great adventure to save your kids, Peter?
Kids?
It does a great job of developing in this character, and it's able to develop this character because essentially it says, hey, yes, we acknowledge that the trickster is kind of like an immature masculine, and we developed him. He's matured. He's gotten better. He matured a little too much, and we're going to address that, but he's the hero, don't worry. He's not going to be like the callous, forgetful, devil-may-care trickster, which is awesome. It works so well. This movie fucking rules. Good job. So Peter and the Starcatcher. Peter and the Starcatcher tries to do the prequel Peter approach, and Peter Prequel Peter kind of sucks. He doesn't really have a name, which is kind of one of the first hallmarks that you're going to get like this kind of nostalgia mysticism around him. He's just called Boy. He is very meek. He's abused, which we're gonna get into it, but I hate trying to like abuse people into tricksters. As we will talk about later, I don't think you can be abused into playing. I think that there's just something insanely dissonant about that. And that's basically the situation here. We don't even really see him start to play in this play. Ironically enough. But but we do see him kind of be the meek one out of a set of a couple little twerps. And eventually, you know, he gets marooned on an island. He does a noble act of self-sacrifice. He's got all of the materials that you'd want a little protagonist to eventually have. And we don't need to put too much weight on him protagonisting, because at least in the version I saw, it's really mostly about the side characters and them being really silly, which is great. But I think it kind of ends up being more for a marketing reason that Peter is in this whatsoever, instead of it being, you know, just a silly pirate play about silly pirates. You know, obviously these films don't exist in a vacuum, and that's a commonality that we're going to see with a lot of these. There is a natural want as audience members for us to go see these characters because we connect to them and we love them and we're interested in them. So slapping a big old Peter on something, just a big floppy Peter, makes it so that more people want to see it because they know who that is and they like him. But that doesn't mean it's good, does it? The Dark Knight. The Dark Knight does not have Joker as a main character, but I'm going to use it as my baseline just to talk about what a great trickster character the Joker is in The Dark Knight in general. And I think that there are some tensions in The Dark Knight that make it particularly interesting as a study of that, because it is kind of like the hallmark of the grim dark Batman. It's not the Adam West Batman with like Cesar Romero's Joker, who is just a laughing dude having a great time. It is not the Batman the Animated Series Batman, where you have Mark Hamill laughing and having a great time. It's not Jack Nicklaus. Wait, what the fuck is his name? Which one's the golfer? Anyway, it's not him laughing and having a great time. No, this Joker has a little bit more of an edge to him. And what do we want from Edge? We want trauma, and we want backstory even more than normal. We want to know, like, yeah, the world sucks. What did the world do to you? How did the world blood meridian you little dude? What happened to you that sucks and is bad? And we get that, and I think that we get it in a really fun kind of way for a trickster. We kind of totally satisfy this backstory almost immediately with the "you want to know how I got these scars" kind of situation. He just lies. Like, I'm pretty sure maybe it's obvious to everyone. He lies. He tells like 3 different origin stories for how he got his scars, and you have no idea which one is true. And it's clear that it's eventually clear to the audience that like this too is playing.
My father was a drinker and a fiend. So I had a wife, she was beautiful, like you, who tells me I worry too much.
And he does like a really great statement of chaos, where he's like, I'm an agent of chaos, or whatever, you know, Tom Waits impression, insert here.
I'm an agent of chaos.
And so eventually, you know, despite the fact that we kind of got these little gestures at backstory, they are meaningless. Like his statement of, I'm a big chaos guy, I love chaos, that's the most real and earnest we ever see him being. Like that, when we're watching the film, feels like the only true thing he's said. And so he's kind of like this fickle, dangerous, unknowable, inscrutable, you cannot scrut him, do not even try, dude. It's good. And it's impossible to make this person into a main character. Who would try? Who would even try to do something that is so fundamentally doomed to failure? Joker 2019. So I'm pretty sure there's been like a lot said about this film in general. And probably the main critique you could have of it is that it's unclear to what extent this guy is the Joker. But you know what? I'm gonna assume that it was trying to make him the Joker because he dresses up like the Joker and it's called Joker. I'm going to ignore what the Wikipedia page says about Joker 2, in which it turns out he's not the Joker. That's stupid, and in fact is a perfect reflection of like the writers clearly realized like, whoa, wait a second, we can't connect this guy up to the Joker. We can only gesture vaguely at he will become the Joker, we promise. So when they wanted to keep playing in the space, they had to figure out how to make him no joke no more, which is fine. No, it's not fine, actually. You're no longer making a Joker film if he isn't the Joker. I think a lot of people have probably said this is not new. Okay, Chris, move on. So this film does kind of make a general attempt to depict something or someone who could plausibly crack and break badly enough to become a kind of a trickster evil. And we do see that throughout the film. Arthur Fleck goes through just a ton of really tough experiences, and yeah, we see him crack. We see all the reasons he has to kind of like hate the world and become cynical and like withdraw inwards, and that's fine. I think it depicts a certain kind of male angst really well, of like, nobody cares about me fundamentally, and yet I have the kind of power that I'm aware of that if I wanted to go and like murder half of society, I could probably make a little dent. And so when I feel disconnected from the society that I'm a part of, then it just makes a certain kind of sense to turn against it in some way and strike out, either to remind it of my value and power or to just attempt further to break away from it. But I think the main thing that I have a problem with is just the idea that this like extremely hurt figure is somehow a precedent for play. I don't think so. Because if you watch this movie and you ask yourself like, okay, I'm gonna wait for him to have fun. Is he having fun right now? Most of the time the answer is no, and I can't draw like a line. Even when he starts to kind of crack, it's the kind of crack where it's like, yes, I'm going to crack to such an extent that I'm laughing, and it's like a scary laugh. But am I playing? In other words, am I having fun? Am I having like a good time? Not really. It's all just kind of like this like icy malice. It's not really play. This is not someone who feels empowered enough to play. I think that fundamentally it makes him hard to recognize as the same character. And the kind of like veneer of cheeriness or like false cheeriness that you see on someone's last day of life when they've decided to like off themselves or something, like that's not them really playing. It's not them actually being happy in the sense that all of us would recognize as something like loving and healthy. And I think that like fundamentally when we look at the Joker, in my opinion, he's someone who's having a good time. He's committing crimes, he's stealing things, he's messing around with this like masked vigilante, and all of these things are fun to him. He's not fundamentally like a sadist, and I think that there's a lot of sadistic moments in this Joker. You can see that he kind of wants to inflict pain, not for fun, but more like to see others suffer the way that he's suffered, which is not a trickster. No, it's just a mad guy. I have written down here, a divorced dad going through a deeply sad midlife crisis is not a trickster. So true, so true. And, you know, kind of giving this as a prequely backstory to this is how it happened. It feels tempting to us because it feels like an underlying explanation for why the Joker is the way that he is. But the second that you give a trickster this underlying explanation is the second that they become knowable. If I was to encounter, if I am Batman, as I would be extremely qualified to be, and I encounter Arthur Fleck, I don't have to be worried. This is not like a crazy, unhinged individual. You don't know what he's gonna do. No, just like, I don't know, hug him, mostly. He just wants a hug. So like, that does not feel like something that is like powerful and dangerous and needing to be studied. It just feels like a sad guy, which is, you know, it's great film for all the sad guys out there, even though like I do feel like it maybe sells a little bit of a false promise that like, oh yeah, if you're a sad guy, just like commit this act of like horrific violence, maybe against the state, and you're gonna feel a lot better. I don't think you feel better. I think that you kind of end up just further alienating yourself from your friends and family, and also like permanently maiming your soul by committing an act of horrific violence. So I don't really know if that makes you feel better necessarily, but it makes you feel something. So, and who am I to judge? Oh yeah, in my notes it says, there is no true silliness in the blithe facade of masked pain. Wow. Yeah, I really expect myself to just read that off as if I'm just saying it. This is the cost of main characterization. We have entirely left archetype and are left with the story of one sad guy. Also in my notes, if your message is yes, violence is warranted and will help you achieve internal peace, emotional catharsis, and your political ends, then you might as well say dulceat decorum est pro patria mori, as Wilfred Owen would say, you know, it is sweet and good to die for one's country. And I don't think that that's correct. I think that it's wrong. And call me crazy, but if you're making a movie and your central message is essentially a lie, like not a perspective necessarily, but just like a lie, I think maybe it's not that great of a movie. So as I had been, the door is now open and there's a dog down there. Other than that, same video. So as I'd been thinking about making this video about what it would really take to try and main character mode one of these characters, I started thinking about flat arcs, because you don't want to change the character. You don't want to kind of make them have a flaw and take them out of trickster mode, nor do I really want to try to ramp someone up into trickster mode within a story. So I was thinking, okay, well, are there stories that just basically have a flat arc main character in which the trickster is untouched? He's allowed to be a horrible, callous trickster person, and he's the main character, whether or not he's the audience insert. I feel like on some level he can't be an audience insert, but there at least isn't one. And I was talking to ChatGPT about it, and it mentioned American Psycho and Clockwork Orange, which I feel like are both pretty good examples of what you would do to do this if you wanted a flat arc trickster. You can have your flat arc trickster. I mean, it's a stretch to call Patrick Bateman a trickster, isn't it? He's immensely concerned with a lot of things, status being one of them, which isn't particularly trickstery. So maybe not American Psycho, and let's just talk about Clockwork Orange, because I think that Alex is a pretty default trickster. He's having fun. He's doing things which are very callous just because they seem fun to him. And one thing that happens with his character is essentially that, like, yes, you get your trickster, but eventually the film kind of has to, like, morally assert its authority back onto the world. You can't have a trickster and just have a whole film in which they're like a horrible, callous person. You can have one clearly in which they're a horrible, callous person that eventually gets reformed in an incredibly cruel way. I feel like it's like a 19th century tradition, if you read a lot of Gothic fiction, to have like some nasty, crazy, raunchy shit happen and then just be like, and then they were horribly punished for it. Horribly. Yes, they paid the price for that. It's fun. It kind of allows you, the viewer, to like get titillated and then also like not feel bad about yourself for having enjoyed that titillation. So I think that that mostly works. And it's probably the main way in which you could actually have a trickster as a protagonist or main character. Otherwise, I don't want to see Peter Pan take like a mandatory HR course and walk out going like, oh, I really learned and reflected about a lot in there. Like, that's not fun. So if you're going to mature your tricksters out of tricksterdom, it's always going to feel a little bit like a loss. So it's better to just say, no, they're horrible people and they will eventually face the consequences of existing. But it did get me thinking about flat arcs in general. And if you look at like what a flat arc fundamentally is, it's usually in terms of, I'm thinking of like Sherlock Holmes or certain kinds of shonen genres. You could argue One Punch Man maybe, in which a character is essentially unchanging. It is the fact that they're unchanging that allows them to be like a mirror for the society around them. In Sherlock Holmes and in most mysteries, so if you think of like Poirot and in general mystery formulas, the story that you're experiencing is just the dopamine of steadily learning more and more about what happened to a particular person in a particular place. And so the people leading you through that story, they don't need to change. And in fact, they shouldn't, because you have things to do. All right, let's get Wonka. Let's get wonked. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, 2005. I initially wasn't going to rewatch this. I remember it just basically being a remake that I didn't particularly enjoy. But then I looked on Wikipedia and I saw that we get some Wonka backstory, which that sounds like main character shit to me. So let's watch it. I love that this movie starts out by gaslighting both us and itself by saying, this is Charlie, he's the main character.
This is a story of an ordinary little boy named Charlie Bucket.
And oh, is he? Really? Are you sure? It kind of goes on to prove itself wrong for the rest of the runtime. Wonka is not playful or powerful in this. He's kind of instead this like idiosyncratic, sallow-faced, nervous wreck.
Dear guests, greetings. Welcome to the factory. I shake you warmly by the hand.
He's neurotic, he's misunderstood, he's given like a dentist father that treated him oh so badly. So it was only after I read the book, which I'll talk about in a bit, that I realized that this is actually an extremely faithful adaptation of the book, with the exception of all the shit parts. This is like more or less a straight book adaptation, except that Wonka has a backstory for some reason. And boy, do they love that backstory. In fact, they give him so much backstory that at some point the writers felt the need to lantern hang it, where he basically just sits there and is like, I've been having a lot of flashbacks recently.
I'm sorry, I was having a flashback.
I see.
Which is, yeah. I mean, yeah, you have. And also, I wrote this before I read the book and realized that this is how it is in the book. But the Charlie in this movie is not being tested in any way. He's just constantly perfect. He has no arc. He starts out loving his family, and the movie ends with Wonka needing to be the one to change. That part's not in the book. But regardless, this means that, guess what? Wonka is the main character in this movie. Charlie is a side character. And it is interesting because clearly they so badly want to, I mean, it's a Johnny Depp vehicle. They want to be all about Wonka. They probably reread the book, realized, oh god, wait, Charlie has no arc in here either necessarily, so it's gotta be Wonka. But in the process, we lose all the trickster from Wonka. He is tricksterless in this. He is not a sly dog. He is like a traumatized puppy shivering in the cold.
Do I?
In fact, Willy Wonka hadn't thought about his childhood for years.
No trickster vibes, sorry. Wonka, 2023. This is Paddington Bear. Just straight up. And I think that's a really interesting choice, because also it's a prequel. We attempt to get some backstory. We attempt to dive into really what was Wonka before he was chocolate factory owning. And this does a lot of really interesting things by essentially trying to make the character into literally Paddington Bear. It's kind of like they realize the predicament of trickster neutral, trickster chaotic, trickster good, or whatever, and we're like, okay, well, look, he's going to be trickster neutral when he's big and traumatizing Charlie, so we'll make him trickster good, and his arc will be from good to neutral. It works to some degree. I mean, the film is like not reviled. I would say it's not the same character, and we'll get into why. So even though this is like prequel Wonka, he kind of retains some power, which is I think what they were going for with the Paddingtonness. Paddington can kind of like magically good-heartedness his way out of like a ton of sticky situations, and it's charming because it feels like, oh good, you know, he solves problems by just being nice. And we're down with that. I think that the writers must have thought that like, okay, well, we can give Wonka here that same kind of power, and we can give him this like Paddington flat arc where we don't care that Paddington is like not having this huge growth story throughout the movie. Instead, it's just more like enjoying how he changes the kind of cold and callous people around him as he moves through the world. And that's the Wonka that we get here. They kind of try to give him a little mom arc where he wants to see his mom again and eat the perfect mom chocolate, but we don't really care. And again, he seems fine without that, so I'm not waiting the whole movie for him to do that. I guess it just is like if this were a seasoning, it would just be like it would just be a pinch of salt to try and like bump up his ability to protagonist a little bit. I'm not sure if it works for other people. For me, I didn't care. And it's kind of hard to decide whether to critique this movie, you know, as a Wonka adaptation or as a Paddington adaptation, because I think, look, let's just analyze it as a Paddington, like briefly, because it bears so little similarity to the original Wonka story in any way. The only similarity is that this guy is Wonka. He likes chocolate. He wears a purple coat. Okay, that's it. All right, so we're going to talk about it as if it's Paddington. First off, Paddington is not a trickster. He may do things that are tricky, but he cares deeply about everyone and everything around him. And Wonka pretty much does as well. He's just a naive, good-hearted dude running through the world and assuming it's all gonna work out. I do feel like they strayed a little bit from the path of the true Paddington-like with Noodle's character. Noodle is just like a downtrodden orphan girl, which sounds good on paper, but in practice she's not really that downtrodden. She just seems a little bit aimless. It does not really seem like it would take all that much to convince her that life is like a fundamentally happy and lovely thing. Just like, I don't know, show her a good time out on the town, and that's essentially what happens. We get the Aladdin, I can show you the world, and Timothy Chalamet is basically like the flipped manic pixie dream boy character in this, in which he's ostensibly the main character. I think there's not really any drama because in a Paddington, like, we would expect to see a character who it's going to be really hard for Paddington to win this guy over, right? Or this gal, you know, they are cold and closed off to the world. That wasn't very convincing. Okay. In your typical Paddington situation, you would expect to see him struggle to convince and flip and you know, open the eyes of some horrible downtrodden being or some terminally curmudgeonous kind of person. But here, Noodle seems like she's just like having a bad year. I don't really buy that she's been like an orphan her whole life and been like slaving through, been suffering through indentured servitude or whatever with the rest of these ragtag crew of characters. They almost give them like a will they won't they romance arc, which doesn't work at all. They realize that it doesn't work at all because I think they must have realized that Wonka has way too much power, and so if you gave them a romance arc, it's basically like extremely powerful, cutesy boy shows up and just like woos one orphan who he frees from indentured servitude is like, that's hard to root for, man. Because I just don't see the challenge in opening her up to his charming antics, I also got like vaguely annoyed that that's where the movie was spending its time. I was like, look, this guy's got stuff to noodle. Not only does the kind of horrific circumstances of her indentured servitude feel like not really that hard to break her out of, just kind of, you know, get her out of her immediate situation and she'd be having a better time. But also, I feel like in the 2020s, it's kind of like a hard sell of Willie being like, hey, I know that your perspective on life is that like the rich get richer and the poor get poorer.
The greedy beat the needy every time, Mr. Wonka. Guess it's just the way of the world.
Oh, come on, Noodle. That's just your orphan syndrome talking.
My what?
But that's not true. Reader, it is kind of true right now. So it's just a little bit weird. I wrote, I can't watch that and root for anyone while you work her further into a delusion that will come crashing down the second she leaves the warm sphere of your powerful aura, Willie. Okay, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Let's get some chocolate in here, huh? Let's watch the original movie. Let's see if it's good. It probably is good. I remember it being good. But as I was about to watch this, I looked on Wikipedia and I saw a quote. And let me read it to you. This is a quote from the Hallowed Hall of Knowledge, Wikipedia. Amongst other things, Dahl was unhappy with the film, the Gene Wilder film, I remind you, with the foregrounding of Wonka over Charlie. And disliked the musical score. Who cares? He didn't like how much Wonka was main charactering in this movie. Can you believe it? What the hell was the original book like if he felt like this Wonka was main charactering? So what did I do, reader? I read the book. I feel like this probably should have been called Charlie. I feel like this book probably should have been called Charlie Bucket and the Gambler's Fallacy. Because this little boy throws away extremely valuable things in his life so many times just for like a hit, just to Skinner box his way to a hit. Because, okay, so similar to the movie, he gets a chocolate bar for his birthday, he opens it, no golden ticket. Okay, fine. Grandpa pulls out his secret stash. They get another chocolate bar. Open that. No golden ticket. Okay. Well, rule of threes, right? In the book, his family's literally starving. His family begins to starve. He finds $1. He spends that $1 on a chocolate bar. Charlie, why? What are you doing, Charlie? Stop it. This is like a horrible depiction of like the traps of poverty, Charlie. Like, spend it on real food, please. Okay. You might say, all right, you know, he bought himself a chocolate bar, there's the golden ticket. No, he buys himself a chocolate bar. It's the third time he's tried this. He opens it, no golden ticket. And it's only when the cashier hands him his change. The change! And he says, actually, one more bar. Just one more bar, man. Jesus, I just peeked the fucking mic. Just one more bar. Oh, I'm still peeking the mic. Just one more bar, man, please. You gotta give me one more bar. I know the ticket will be in that one. Stop, Charlie. I'm concerned for you. I'm concerned for your future. Jesus Christ. Gambling. We made gambling mostly illegal, Charlie. This is nasty stuff. Just keep hitting. Keep hitting, Charlie. It'll pay. Can't lose. Okay, we're back to 71. We're done with the book. The book is good. It's good mostly because it's short. It gets away with not really heavily characterizing Charlie or giving him an arc because Charlie is the good boy. And this book isn't about him. It is about how nasty children get punished, which is beautiful in a way. You know, it's a beautiful message. It's dull, so he doesn't pull punches. He's like, no, they get punished. They're horrible, nasty little things. They need to learn a lesson, that's very fun. It's fun to read about, and I imagine it must be very fun as a parent to read to your kid and be like, by the way, yeah, you just don't fuck it up, kid, because this is what happens to you. It's a modern day Santa Claus, really. So straight up, we see that the screenplay is by Roald Dahl. I don't know if there's like other ghostwriters involved, but if he really did write all the screenplay, that's wild. Because it was entirely like direction and acting that takes this to the level it goes. Also, Slugworth is an amazing addition in this film. He's not in the book, and he's also absent from the 2005, which is, I guess, because it's such a faithful adaptation. But no, Slugworth immediately makes this film into a horror film. There's just like a creeping, lurking dude who's constantly trying to get you to mess up. He is the snake in the garden of evil. He is temptation. Charlie immediately sees him as the snake that he is. Charlie will later be tempted by something else.
There's nothing to grab onto! Help! We're gonna get killed!
Which is also something this film does really well. It's awesome that Charlie and Grandpa Joe fuck up in this. It really is. Because it makes you actually have some question about whether they're going to win this entire endeavor. Book Wonka is like Trickster good. He is at times maybe a little bit curt, but he is never sadistic. He is never the kind of like toying with a dead animal brand of trickster the way that Gene Wilder plays him.
The suspense is terrible. I hope it'll last.
And I think it's really down to his temper. Wilder's Wonka, just via the plot and script, is, this entryway into this other world, a world of excess and power. Wilder gives him the total inscrutability by just not knowing what the hell this dude is thinking at any moment. He seems like he could explode on you in anger at any moment for any reason.
So you get nothing. You lose. Good day, sir.
And that he really relishes when people are punished for not doing what he wants, which is great. Total trickster vibes. Like the fundamental underlying threat here is that Wonka could turn violent or at least turn against your interests for any reason. And so the most powerful tool that you have at your disposal in this situation where you are outpowered is empathy, is attempting to understand what he wants of you and then attempting to give it to him. The impulse is fundamentally very like Stockholm Syndrome-y. We seek to understand our captor, which is also interesting, but it makes a lot of sense from a survival perspective. Like, here we are in his domain. He is totally powerful. Understanding him allows us to pass through his kingdom unharmed.
So shines a good deed in a weary world.
Which is why we feel the need, alongside our perspective characters, to understand these tricksters. And whereas like a rational king might have a rational route to flattering that king, with a trickster it's not immediately obvious. It's flattery and groveling on hard mode. If you flatter Wonka, is he going to accept that flattery, or will he be insulted by the thing that you've chosen to flatter him on? Does he actually hate that? Our empathy just like latches on to that uncertainty and like tries to pay extremely close attention because it feels so important. These tricksters are so powerful because they exist in a domain. With Peter Pan, it's Neverland. With the Joker, it's his hideout surrounded by lackeys. In each of these domains, they are in their element, and we, the audience, coming in through the perspective characters, don't understand the world that they rule over or the people that they have sway over. And that's why it's such a, I would say double-edged sword, but what's a sword that just isn't even going to, it's a single-edged sword, but the edge is facing you. It's why it's hard. I'm saying it's hard to adapt them. If we show the audience some earlier version of Wonka or Joker or Pan that wasn't powerful, then immediately we don't feel as interested and it doesn't seem as relevant. There's no real way to connect the thread through to see how they would even move, like from this scared little boy towards Pan, from this, in Johnny Depp's version, also a scared little boy at the dentist, to Wonka in the Todd Phillips Joker, a scared little man to the Joker. Something is always going to ring hollow about these adaptations and retellings. And I think when I say that we struggle to see the line through, it's hard to imagine any line from suffering and hardship towards play. Play is, I think, fundamentally the absence of suffering. Play is freedom. It's relaxed. It's vulnerable because it's kind of accessing a childlikeness. And so when we see these characters being hurt as children, it feels like it entirely precludes them eventually getting to a place where they're open enough to play. And if they were to get to that place, we'd have to see it happening. Otherwise, it's just like, okay, how does this happen? I don't get it. This doesn't I don't recognize this person. The two extremes feel like anathema to one another. We know that suffering and cycles of abuse leave their mark. Just look at the people around us. Those people do not have an easy time playing. And when they snap, they may, yes, act callous or sadistic, but it is not the callousness and sadisticness that comes with play. It's not the callousness and sadisticness of someone who's detached and who may, later walk away from this brief object of amusement to them. No, it's like a honed and focused anger, which is logical, feels logical. It's focused, it's aimed, not the same thing. I wrote, so as we've seen, to attempt to mask the transition by hand-waving the true play of the trickster into the false play of the feigning psychopath rings hollower still. Words of wisdom from me. I should mention, if I haven't mentioned it, that Gene Wilder's is amazing. It's the ultimate trickster energy because you never know what he's gonna do. I know there's a great quote from him where he talks about wanting to do the initial forward roll as well as, from that point on, you would just never know whether he was lying or telling the truth, which is awesome. As we talk a little bit about what happens when you try to create like this line from suffering and hardship to tricksterdom, the other pathway of just creating like the trickster, but he's a main character and he's pretty much the character as the protagonist, creates this equally strange character. Like in Pan 2015, Peter doesn't have any real reason to be in the movie. They try to give him one, but it doesn't work. Tricksters are fundamentally not part of the crowd, and so it doesn't work to make them the perspective character. They don't have any of the trappings that make them like a full-fledged human being, namely empathy or caring about anything themselves. But that's the beauty of seeing them as perspective characters. Not only does it kind of reveal something to us about narrative that these can't be protagonists, but it also tells us something about empathy and why it's like such a fundamental human drive. The point of the video, to turn them into one of us, strips them of why we love to think about them so much in the first place. Editing Chris here. Thank you for watching all of that. That was really nice of you. Normally people would ask you to subscribe, but I want to keep in contact without YouTube in the middle. I have a Substack. If you want to follow me on there, there's never going to be any paid stuff to my knowledge. If there is, it won't be anything big. You can just get all of my videos notified via email because I feel like that's better than having to worry about an algorithm. And rather have like 2 Substack subscribers than 2 million YouTube. That's an exaggeration. Never mind. Who cares? Thank you.